Hey there, night owls. Tonight we're time hopping to 1845 Tennessee, where the jasmine smells like Grandma's perfume, the whiskey flows like campaign ads, and a coffin is about to be upstaged by a parrot who could make a sailor blush, apologize, then blush harder. Bring earbuds. The bird brings the bleep button budget of 0. Real talk. You'd last about as long as a snowman in a sauna. Modern amenities. Try candlelight, chamber pots, and conversational smallpox. Survival rating, 1 star, and that star is currently on fire. If you're enjoying this odd little campfire of history, tap like. It's free and burns 0 calories. Subscribing is optional but highly recommended. It keeps the algorithm happier than Jackson at a duel. Drop your city and local time in the comments. Let's see who's listening at way too late o'clock. Dim the lights. Cue the fan for that soft airplane hum, and let's taxi down the runway to Dreamland, stopping briefly at a funeral where the eulogy is rated R and the guest of honor can't stop squawking. Buckle up, buttercups. The past is ready for takeoff. The Hermitage porch is lit by only 3 candles, their flames so shy they apologize to the dark every time the wind exhales. You step onto the boards, barefoot because shoes feel suddenly ridiculous in 1845, and the wood gives a grateful sigh, as if it's been waiting for someone who isn't wearing mourning black. Jasmine vines have strangled the railing so politely that even the flowers whisper. Somewhere inside, a coffin rests on sawhorses, lid not yet screwed down, and you can almost hear the old man arguing about the workmanship. But it's the air you notice first, thick as warm molasses, scented with lilac, gun oil, and something green feathered that absolutely should not have learned human language. Every exhale you make feels borrowed, like the 19th century is kindly letting you rent oxygen so long as you promise not to change anything. You agree silently, crossing your heart the way kids do when they swear they brushed their teeth. Footsteps shuffle behind you. Neighbors, slaves, nieces, political enemies who drove all night to make sure the tyrant is truly defanged. Their murmurs braid into a single rope of sound. Can't find the bird. Say it bit the senator. Flew off with the funeral ribbon. You almost laugh, but laughter feels disrespectful, so you turn it into a yawn the way polite people do in church. Then you see it, a dart of emerald against the soot-colored hallway, a wingtip slicing candle smoke like a tiny drunken saber. Pole the parrot circles once, lands on the portrait rail, and tilts his head as if asking whether you, random time traveler, brought snacks. You didn't. He swears anyway, one crisp syllable that rhymes with spit, delivered in the exact gravelly baritone Andrew Jackson used to scold cabinet members. The mourners gasp in perfect 4-part harmony. You feel the swear word slap the air, soft as a velvet glove filled with buckshot. It should be funny. Instead, it's heartbreaking because the bird doesn't know his only human is boxed up in the next room. You extend a finger. Pole sidesteps, mutters something unintelligible, Greek, Cherokee, Market Day French, and then, almost gently, drops a single feather onto your palm. The barbs are still warm, as if language itself has a body temperature. Behind you, a woman in bombazine fans herself without closing her mouth. That creature'll disrupt the whole service, she hisses, as though the funeral were a garden party and death merely an unreliable florist. You want to reply, but words feel slippery, so you just pocket the feather, promising it better adventures than a coffin-side vigil. The candles gutter. Thunder far off rehearses its own eulogy. You notice your heartbeat has synchronized with the shuffle of black-clad feet, thump, scuff, thump, like a lullaby composed by someone who's only heard rumors of sleep. A hand lands on your shoulder, an elderly stableman, eyes red, breath sweet with corn liquor. "Best stay close to the doors, stranger," he whispers. "Pole's fixin' to preach, and the deceased ain't the only one headed underground tonight." The warning should chill you, but the night is too thick for fear to travel fast. Instead, curiosity blooms. An absurd, gentle need to know how many syllables a parrot can steal from a human lifetime. You nod thanks, slide along the wainscot, and follow the green flicker deeper into the house, past tables of deviled eggs and ham slices sweating under cheesecloth, past children wedged under pianos, past a dog too depressed to chase the bird it was bred to hate. Somewhere a clock strikes 9. The sound is muffled, as if time itself is wearing crepe. You imagine the gears inside hesitating, reluctant to push another hour past the dead man's name. Pole flits ahead, a tour guide with no script and even less reverence, and you trail him, barefoot, candle-shadowed, already complicit in whatever scandal tomorrow's newspapers will sweeten into legend. By the time you reach the doorway of the front parlor, the bird has vanished again, leaving only an echo that tastes of tobacco, gunpowder, and sugar overburned in a skillet. You rest your palm against the jamb, feel the house pulse like something half asleep, and realize the night has only just begun. The hallway is a tunnel of candle haze and restless shadows. Every flame behaves like it's afraid of the dark, flickering sideways instead of up. You step through the tobacco-thick air, and it wraps around you the way a cat claims a new couch. Casually, completely, with claws you notice too late. Somewhere overhead, Pole's wings beat a rhythm that sounds suspiciously like a waltz in a minor key. A mourner, male, mutton-chopped, eyes glazed by grief and corn liquor, offers you a pull from a clay pipe. You decline with the polite headshake tourists use when offered mystery meat. He shrugs, exhales a blue cloud that spells out, if you squint, the word democracy, then dissolves into coughs. The smoke drifts upward, finds Pole perched on a dusty chandelier, and the bird inhales like a judge sampling evidence. "Hellfire," Pole remarks conversationally. The chandelier crystals tinkle in embarrassment. Several elderly women fan themselves so hard the candles bend sideways, creating accidental wax icicles on the sideboard. You hide your smile inside a pretend cough. Even your lungs feel conspiratorial. Jackson's casket rests straight ahead, gleaming like a pirate's rum bottle, mahogany, brass rails, and a plate nobody wants to polish again. You expected solemnity. Instead, the scene feels like a tavern where someone forgot to serve the jokes. A teenage boy tiptoes up, places a sugar cube on the coffin lid, as if the general might wake up and demand coffee. No one scolds him. Death makes children the only reliable adults. Pole swoops, lands on the coffin rail, and eyes the sugar. The room inhales collectively. For a heartbeat, the only sound is wax hitting hardwood, tiny meteors burning up in their own brief atmosphere. Then the parrot dips his head, snatches the cube, and flaps away, scattering granules like imperfect snow across the deceased's breastplate. Somewhere a stifled giggle escapes. Grief's seam is leaking. You feel the feather in your pocket warm against your thigh, as if it remembers flight paths and swear words and every midnight argument between a stubborn general and a bird who never learned surrender. Instinct says to stroke it. Dignity says keep your hands to yourself. Dignity wins by a feather. A door creaks. Cool night air slips in, carrying June bugs that orbit the candles like tiny drunken meteors. One lands on your sleeve, clicks its wings, takes off again. Apparently even insects have social anxiety here. You follow its trajectory and spot Pole disappearing through the library doorway, tail feathers flicking Morse code you can't read but somehow trust. Your bare feet decide for you, library. The floorboards shift from polished oak to Persian rug, nap thick enough to hide small rebellions. Inside, moonlight leans through floor to ceiling windows, painting silver ladders across thousands of spines, law, theology, horticulture, conquest. Pole is already on Andrew Jackson's favorite chair back, shredding a tasseled cord into linguistic confetti. On the desk lies an open ledger, expenses for the funeral, whiskey, pine boxes, black ribbon, sugar cubes. Someone has doodled a tiny parrot in the margin, giving the reader the middle toe. Ink is still wet. The doodler can't be far. You glance around, see only shadows and the smell of old victories. Pole whistles, two descending notes that feel like a sigh translated into music. Then, softer, almost lovingly, he says the dead man's nickname, Hickory. The syllables rasp, not because the bird lacks tenderness, but because tenderness itself is rough cut here. You answer without thinking, I'm sorry, Pole. The bird blinks once, as if receipt of apology is itemized and filed. Outside the window, lightning bugs dot the darkness like punctuation marks no sentence wants. You breathe in leather, lamp oil, and the faint sweetness of sugar dissolving somewhere in a parrot's beak. For a moment, the room feels balanced, a man in a box, a bird on a chair, a stranger from the future barefoot in the middle, holding a single feather like a library card for emotions nobody taught you how to name. Then the candles in the hall gutter again, voices rise. Someone announces it's time to screw down the lid. Pole tenses, prepares for another sortie. You realize the night is about to get louder before it gets quiet. The hallway boards are wider than your foot is long, each plank scarred by spurs that once clicked like castanets in a bad mood. You feel them under your arches, tiny ridges where steel met wood, pressed deeper every time Andrew Jackson decided pacing solved problems better than prayer. Somewhere between the library and the stair, you step directly into a ghost print, left boot, heel worn, toe eager. For a second the house tilts. History wants to borrow your knees. Pole circles overhead, muttering numbers. 8, 7, 6, like a countdown nobody asked for. Maybe he's estimating how many curse words fit in a coffin. You follow the echo of spurred confidence into the front parlor again, where men in black coats prepare to seal the general's view of eternity. One turns a brass screw. The sound is polite, metallic, final. You expect sorrow to intensify. Instead, the room exhales relief, the way a kettle stops screaming once the water's gone. Closure apparently smells like cedar shavings and corn liquor breathed through grief-struck teeth. A girl braids, bare feet peeking beneath hem, tiptoes to you and offers a square of hard candy wrapped in twisted paper. You take it, she whispers, for the bird, then vanishes into skirts and sadness. The candy is clove, sweet enough to mask the taste of 1830s dentistry. You tuck it into your palm like a bribe you haven't earned yet. Pole lands on a tourquière head-cocked, eyes pinning the wrapper with laser accuracy. Sugar talk, he accuses, as though negotiation itself were indecent. Behind you, the undertaker's assistants lift the casket onto a wheeled bier. Every wheel squeaks in a different key, forming a chord that would make a composer drink alone. Jackson's earthly cargo sways once, settles. You imagine the old man inside counting enemies, women, victories, regrets, an abacus of bones. A voice, male ready, scented with chewing tobacco, reads the first line of the funeral liturgy. Pole answers with a full sentence historians never quote in textbooks. Several mourners gasp. One laughs into her handkerchief so hard she hiccups. The Undertaker's eyebrows attempt to escape over his hairline. You feel laughter bubbling in your own throat, inappropriate as fireworks at a baptism, and swallow it so hard your ears pop. Boot prints continue past the bier, down 3 steps, into the entrance hall where dust motes swirl like gossip. You track them, barefoot detective, until they fade beneath a rug so faded it looks like sunrise on the brink of resignation. Somewhere in that fuzz, heel iron, perhaps a shard of mud from a New Orleans battlefield, maybe a drop of Rachel's tears dried into crystalline guilt. Pole follows at shoulder height, wings fanning the air enough to ruffle caller cards on the hall table. One card reads, Carl J. Audubon-esque, regrets. You picture the great bird painter meeting Pole, wonder if ornithology includes profanity in field notes. Probably not. Scientists prefer their specimens mute and their swear words Latin. Outside, clouds shift. Moonlight slides through the transom and paints the prints silver again, brief resurrection of evidence. You crouch, trace them with a finger that never pulled a trigger, never signed an Indian removal act, never loved hard enough to duel over it. The boards are warm, storing June like a secret. For a moment, you consider laying your cheek there, listening for drumbeats of a long-ago march. Instead, you stand, pocket the clove candy next to the feather, and feel both items negotiate territorial rights in your linen. Pole whistles. 3 descending notes this time, almost satisfied. Somewhere a clock coughs up the half-hour. Mourners prepare to move the casket onto the lawn for final viewing. You realize the night's middle is approaching, that soft, expanding hour when anything can be forgiven if said in the right accent. You breathe in boot leather, candle smoke, and the faint ozone of a storm that hasn't decided whether to arrive. Ahead, the front door swings open. Night air rushes in like a cousin who's been knocking forever. You follow the prints right out onto the veranda, knowing each step erases them a little more, aware you're witnessing the slowest disappearing act on record. The veranda boards fade beneath your toes and reappear as frost, brittle Kentucky grass, silvered by a January sunrise that looks too shy to commit. Time hiccups. 1845 coughs you up into 1806. You shiver, part cold, part scandalized delight, because you've landed in the moment young Andrew Jackson decides etiquette requires bullets. Mist hovers waist high, making every man look like a ghost with unfinished business. 20 paces ahead, pistol in hand, stands Charles Dickinson, handsome, well-dressed, famously better aim. He yawns, either bored or terrified. You can't tell. The etiquette of dueling forbids facial honesty. Jackson is closer to you, coat off, white shirt so clean it feels accusatory. His left arm lies against his ribs in a makeshift sling, an insult already received in an earlier argument over a horse bet and a slurred remark about Rachel's honor. You notice his boot prints again, fresh here, heel digging a small crater of resolve. Same boots, earlier century, smaller reputation. A referee, doctor/lawyer/part-time undertaker, counts paces. His voice trembles like a fiddler reaching for a high note. Pole is nowhere, but you half expect a green feather to drift by, proof the Parrot moonlights as historian. Instead, silence owns the meadow, broken only by the soft click of pistols being cocked like disapproving tongues. You exhale. Your breath becomes a small cloud that drifts toward Jackson, curls around his collar, and vanishes. He doesn't notice, but you feel absurdly responsible, as though your 21st century oxygen might tilt the scale between life and death. The command comes, fire. Dickinson lifts, aims, shoots. The sound is a metal door slamming on tomorrow. Jackson staggers, steadies, left hand pressed to a rib now hosting lead. Blood blooms through linen like a poppy in a hurry. He does not fall, instead he raises his own pistol. It misfires, click like a bad joke. Rules allow a redo. He recocks, slower than treacle, and fires. Dickinson crumples, astonished as if death were an RSVP that arrived early. You taste gunpowder, metallic and antique, coating your tongue like history's own dental work. The meadow holds its breath. Even the mist forgets to drift. Jackson bows to the referee, walks toward you, toward nowhere, boot heel leaving blood diluted with dew. He passes so close, you see the determination in his eyes calcify into something that will never quite leave him, or the country he'll help shape. Somewhere inside the wound, a bullet will linger for life, migrating like a restless tourist. Decades later, doctors will blame every cough on it. Pole will mimic the wheeze, and you time-tossed observer will remember this exact grass stain on greatness. The referee kneels beside Dickinson. You look away, but your ears record the soft gurgle of a man learning last words in real time. It's ugly, intimate, and over before the sun finishes climbing. Jackson's friends hustle him toward a carriage. Blood drips across frost, writing punctuation the ground refuses to parse. You follow at a distance, barefoot on frozen earth, souls stinging like you've stepped on tiny criticisms. Jackson glances back once, not at you, but at the horizon, as though calculating how many enemies it can store. His eyes hold the same flat certainty you saw in Pole when the Parrot swore, a belief that volume can outshout consequence. Inside the carriage, Jackson asks for a cigar, receives one, lights it from a coach lantern. Smoke curls out the window, finds your face, and you inhale before realizing you've just shared second-hand tobacco with a future president seconds after he killed a man. Your lungs file a complaint. Your brain labels the moment too weird to process pre-coffee. The carriage rattles off, leaving you alone with hoof prints, blood drops, and one spent ball cooling in the grass. The mist begins to lift, revealing the absurd green of a new day that has no comment policy regarding homicide. You crouch, touch a crimson spot, not to heal, just to confirm texture. It's slick, already separating into history and myth. A single green feather floats down, landing precisely where Jackson's blood meets Dickinson's. You stare at it, unsure which traveler left it there, only certain the meadow has closed its account. Somewhere in the distance, Pole's voice echoes across centuries, a salty syllable that might be Anna, or might be something entirely more honest. The Kentucky frost melts under your toes and reforms as soggy sawdust on Pennsylvania Avenue, March 1829. You're on the White House lawn, cheek by jowl with 10,000 brand new Americans who think inauguration is Latin for world's largest open bar. The air smells of wet wool, roasted corn, and democracy sweating through its shirt. Andrew Jackson, now the people's choice, not merely the people's gunfighter, stands on the portico, white hair streaming like a battle flag that's decided to age gracefully. He raises a hand. The crowd answers with a roar loud enough to rattle every teacup in Virginia. You feel the vibration in your ribs and wonder if applause can bruise. Behind you, a wagon tips under the weight of a 1,400-pound cheese wheel, gift from a dairy cooperative, proof that gratitude can be both heartfelt and lactose-heavy. The driver hacks off fist-sized chunks, hands them out like edible campaign promises. You accept a wedge. It's sharp, barnyardy, and already warmer than the Constitution. Indoors, the doors have surrendered. Citizens pour through hallways, boots caking imported rugs with honorable mud. Someone plays Hail to the Chief on a fiddle missing 2 strings. The tune limps, but enthusiasm provides the missing notes. You drift with the tide, clinging to your cheese like a dairy life preserver. In the East Room, furniture huddles in corners as if staging a protest. Chairs stand on upholstery, wearing footprints like unflattering tattoos. A teenage boy demonstrates how to balance on the settee arms just like a congressman, then face plants into a spittoon. The metallic clang receives its own round of applause. America loves percussion. Pole appears, perched on a chandelier that once hosted Martha Washington's candles. He's larger now, vocabulary ripened to full sailor. "Thief! Thief!" he screams, apparently rating cheese distribution. Several revelers check their pockets, half expecting to find missing virtue. Jackson enters, escorted by 2 aides who look like they've herded cats through hurricanes. He grins, an expression that splits his face into equal parts welcome and warning. When he waves, the crowd surges. You're pressed against a column carved during the Adams administration, wondering if architecture bruises. A local militia colonel attempts a waltz with a woman who may or may not be his wife. They spin, collide with the Marine band, knocking a trumpet into a punch bowl. The resulting chord is jazz, 40 years early. Pole whistles approval, then dive bombs the bowl for a beakful of rum. His subsequent squawk is hoarse with approval and alcohol. You notice the wallpaper, French import, scenes of Arcadian shepherds, now accessorized with fingerprints and one perfect cheese outline where an enthusiastic voter high-fived a mythological goat. Preservation societies of the future will weep. Tonight it's just participatory art. Jackson climbs a small dais meant for chamber musicians. "Friends," he begins, voice like river gravel rolled in honey, "this is your house." The crowd answers by lifting a Kentucky farmer onto their shoulders so he can shout, "Huzzah for the people's president!" The farmer's coonskin cap brushes the ceiling, dust drifts like bipartisan confetti. Someone hands you a mug of cider. You sip, taste autumn and ambition. A small girl tugs your sleeve, offers a bite of her maple candy in exchange for lifting her onto a windowsill. Bargain struck. She surveys the chaos like a junior monarch and declares, "Best party ever." You can't argue. Even the portraits on the walls seem to smirk. Outside, dusk folds the city into lavender. Lamps flicker on, but indoors the light stays wild. Candles, torches, a physician's experimental limelight that hisses like an insulted cat. Shadows jitter across faces, turning every grin into a jack-o'-lantern, every frown into a gargoyle. Time feels drunk enough to waltz with itself. Pole swoops back to Jackson's shoulder, whispers something that makes the old soldier laugh so hard he coughs. You're too far to catch the joke, but you see the president wipe his eyes, then offer the bird a sip from his glass. The crowd takes this as benediction. If the general and his parrot share a drink, then so can everyone. Glasses clink, cheese disappears, sawdust drinks spilled liquor and perfumes the room with fermented history. Eventually you find yourself near an open window, night air cooling the sweat on your neck. Music, laughter, and the occasional Parrot curse roll past you onto the lawn where revelers dance reels beneath stars that have seen worse parties and still refuse to judge. You breathe in, lungs full of cider, candle smoke, and possibility, aware you're standing at the hinge of an era that hasn't decided which direction to slam. The inaugural waltz dissolves like sugar in hot tea. One moment you're swirling amid fiddles and cheese fumes. The next you're alone in a candle-lit library that smells of hide glue, pipe ash, and the quiet panic of new paperwork. The door snicks shut. muting the distant revelry to a polite earthquake. Pole is already here, balanced on a globe of the world, talons digging into the British Empire as if sizing a rival. Andrew Jackson slumps in a leather chair that creaks like an old confession. His boots, those same time-traveling boots, rest on a footstool upholstered in bald eagle taste level, early frontier. He looks less like the people's hero and more like a man who's discovered democracy comes with a hangover. A decanter of amber liquid glows on the desk. He doesn't reach for it yet, just stares at the bird as though seeking translation services. You hover near the curtains, barefoot on bearskin. Yes, actual bear, mouth frozen in a roar that now serves as draft excluder. No one notices you. History assumes you're part of the furniture, maybe a particularly lifelike footman. Perfect. You become a listening shadow. Jackson pats his breast pocket, withdraws a sugar lump reserved for Rachel's tea. Rachel is gone, back in Tennessee, nursing both heart palpitations and a grudge against Washington's climate. The president rolls the sugar across his knuckles, clucks his tongue. Pole answers with a polite, "Good, sir," learned from some forgotten diplomat. So far, Sunday school clean. The general leans forward. "All right, Pole, time you learned some real vocabulary." His voice is hoarse from speeches and cigar smoke. He pops the sugar into his own mouth instead, delaying gratification like a schoolmaster, and begins a litany of phrases, each delivered with the crisp enunciation of a man who's both cussed and been cussed by professionals. You count along, one mild barnyard noun, two anatomical impossibilities, a slur against Whigs, a speculation on Henry Clay's parentage. Pole tilts his head, pupils dilating like ink drops in water. Mimicry is his love language, profanity, his blank canvas. Jackson repeats the string slower, tapping the desk in iambic pentameter. You realize he's teaching meter as well as meaning, Shakespeare by way of bar fight. After the third recital, Pole squawks back a near-perfect echo, minus one consonant, adding a whistle for flourish. The president grins the grin of a teacher whose student just spelled anti-disestablishmentarianism without prompting. He rewards the bird with the sugar, now sticky from presidential saliva. Pole accepts, then immediately utters the new phrase again, louder, as if beta testing volume limits. Jackson laughs until he wheezes. Somewhere in the hallway, a valet drops a silver tray. You feel the word vibrate through floorboards, embedding itself into walnut grain, into plaster, into the very blueprint of the house. A clock strikes 2. The nation outside sleeps off its democratic binge. Inside, lesson 2 begins. Jackson pours 2 fingers of whiskey, one for himself, one into a teacup for Pole. The bird sips, pauses, considers flavor notes of caramel and federal over each, then delivers a fresh combination that rhymes bank with an activity best left to consenting adults. You swallow a laugh, but it sneaks out your nose. Jackson finally notices you, raises an eyebrow the size of a bayonet. You approve, stranger. Options flash, run, curtsy, recite the Constitution. Instead you shrug, whisper, "Language is currency, sir. Looks like you're minting coin." He studies you, decides you're harmless, and returns to his pupil. For the next hour the curriculum expands. Nautical oaths from revolutionary days, frontier euphemisms Jackson learned chasing red sticks, French curses borrowed from New Orleans card shops. Pole repeats each, adding trills, clicks, occasional Bronx cheer. By the time the candles gutter, the Parrot's vocabulary rivals a prison library. Jackson, fatigue finally outweighing mischief, pushes back his chair. "Enough, Professor," he tells the bird. "Save some for the preachers." He stands, joints popping like distant musket fire, and heads for the door. Before exiting, he turns. "Mind the furniture," he says, whether to you or Pole is unclear, then disappears toward marital telegrams and national debt. You're alone with the bird. Pole preens, then fixes you with one amber eye. "Hellfire and democracy," he declares, enunciating perfectly. It sounds like a campaign slogan waiting for silk screening. You clap softly, the way one applauds a toddler who's just sung the alphabet backward. He bows, drops a tiny feather onto the open dictionary below, landing on the word ornithology, obliterating it with down. Outside, dawn's first slate blue light fingers the window. You realize you've witnessed the birth of a legend, a president gifting posterity not just policy but profanity in avian surround sound. Someday, at a funeral, those words will scandalize senators. Tonight, they're merely bedtime lullabies for a man who can't sleep without noise. You pocket the new-fallen feather, green-rimmed with presidential whiskey, and tiptoe out, leaving Pole to practice conjugations. Behind you, he experiments with volume, testing how far syllables can travel through an unquiet house. The answer, farther than modesty, further than silence, almost as far as tomorrow. The White House library dissolves into parchment-scented dusk, and you're led by candlelight down a corridor that smells of lilac water and camphor. Somewhere in the walls, Rachel Jackson is dying, has died, will always be dying. Grief loops like a scratched record. You pause outside a bedroom door cracked just enough for sorrow to slip through. Inside, Andrew Jackson hunches over a small writing desk, quill trembling above cream-colored stationery. His left arm is still bound from the duel, ribs wrapped tight. Every breath fights through both linen and memory. Pole perches on the bedpost, unusually mute, as if profanity itself fears to interrupt. You enter quietly, bare feet silent on the rug. The room is an aquarium of lamplight, golden, suspended, populated by slow-moving shadows. On the bed lies a lace cap that will never again hold Rachel's graying curls. Its emptiness seems to weigh the mattress. Jackson doesn't look up, but you feel him register your presence. Another witness to the moment language tries to bandage a mortal wound. He dips the quill, writes, "My beloved wife," stops. Ink beads falls, forms a tiny black star on the page. The word beloved looks suddenly inadequate, like using a teaspoon to bail an ocean. He mutters something raw, not quite a curse, not quite a prayer. Pole tilts his head, stores the sound in the vault. Jackson starts again. "My heart is bereft of every comfort." The sentence trails. He presses palm to eyes, smudging grief and ink into a bruised rainbow. You want to offer tissues, a hug, modern platitudes about time, but history has no slot for anachronistic comfort. So you stand sentinel, breathing with him, sharing oxygen across 2 centuries. After a minute he straightens, voice barely above the scratch of quill. "She begged me to resign ambition, said Washington would devour her." He laughs, a sound like gravel in a tin cup. "I told her politics only nibbled. I lied." The confession hangs, awaiting absolution that never arrives. He writes again, faster now, words piling like cordwood, memories of Tennessee cabins, riverside walks, her laughter when he mispronounced French. Every line ends before he wants, paragraphs break like dry sticks. You read upside down, an intimacy voyeurs call research. One sentence reads, "I would burn the globe to hear thee cough again." The ink trembles as if ashamed of its honesty. Pole shifts, releases a tiny chirrup, the bird equivalent of clearing throat. Jackson glances over, eyes bloodshot maps of sleeplessness. "Not now, Professor," he whispers. Pole obeys, but you see the beak move silently, rehearsing future syllables like an understudy waiting in the wings. At last, Jackson folds the letter, seals it with black wax, presses Rachel's initial ring into the puddle until it cools. The letter will go into her coffin tomorrow, words chosen for an audience of one who can no longer read. He sets it aside, exhales a sound that might be resignation or merely the body remembering it must keep breathing. You notice other pages scattered, a draft of an inaugural address with lines crossed out so violently the paper tears, a note to Van Buren about party unity, a grocery list, laudanum, lemons, shrouds. Politics and grief share the same desk, like rival siblings forced to bunk together. Jackson stands, moves to the window. Outside, Washington City sleeps in gas-lit grids, every window a small, indifferent eye. He speaks to the glass, voice fogging the pain. They'll cheer Monday, bury her Tuesday, ask for jobs by Friday. The observation is soft, factual, devastating. Pole answers with a single syllable, half cough, half curse, an embryonic version of the word he'll later scream at clergymen. It lands like comfort in a language only grief understands. The president turns, notices you again, or maybe finally sees you. "Stranger, write this down," he says. You freeze, unsure if disclosure breaks cosmic rules. He continues anyway. "Tell 'em love and power can't share a bed. One always steals the blankets." He attempts a smile. It collapses halfway, victim of insufficient practice. Before you can respond, mentally crafting footnotes, he walks out, shoulders bowed under invisible artillery. Pole remains, hops to the desk, pecks at an ink pot until his beak sports a black goatee. He looks at you, recites in Rachel's soft drawl, "Come to bed, Andy." The mimicry is so perfect the room temperature drops. Then, voice pivoting back to gravel, he adds a salty postscript that would make the devil blush. You back away, pocket another feather shed in the commotion, and ease the door shut. In the corridor, candle flames bow in sequence, a funeral procession of fire. Somewhere a clock ticks loud enough to remind you every second is a tiny coffin for the present. Behind the closed door, quill scratches resume. Perhaps another letter, perhaps a country. You leave the man to his ink, his dead, and the bird learning to translate heartbreak into scandal. Tomorrow, official Washington will demand smiles. Tonight, words bleed quietly into paper, soft as lullabies, dark as closed eyes. The corridor tilts and dumps you, softly as a sleepy butler, into the White House kitchen 3 weeks later. Dawn leaks through high windows, painting flower motes gold while the rest of Washington pretends to be dignified. You land on flagstones still warm from yesterday's bread ovens, smelling of yeast, scalded milk, and the faint panic of incoming guests. Copper pans gleam like inverted political promises. A side of bacon lounges on a hook, relaxed about its fate. On the central table, the remnants of the inaugural cheese, now a moonscape of craters, rind thick as campaign rhetoric, interior oozing ambition. Pole is already present, beak greased, standing on a melon as if it were a globe he's considering conquering. The door bangs open. Enter the hungry, the hopeful, the shameless. Office seekers in borrowed coats swarm the room, clutching recommendations scrawled on tavern napkins. One offers the cook a free grave plot in exchange for forwarding his petition to the president. Another tries to barter a pocket watch for a slice of cheese, as if dairy were legal tender. It kind of is today. You keep to the corner, half hidden by a crate of Barbados sugar, marveling at democracy's yard sale. Pole watches transactions with the narrowed eyes of a tax auditor. When a skinny lad snatches a wedge of cheese and bolts, the Parrot shouts, "Thief! Scoundrel!" Vocabulary freshly minted from the presidential inkwell. The boy drops his loot, terrified of moral inventory delivered by poultry. The cook, Mrs. Meggs, red-faced and wielding a ladle like a scepter, bargains fiercely. "You want the president's ear? Peel potatoes first." Several petitioners accept, forming an impromptu prep line. Potatoes fly, skins flecking the air like confetti at a very beige carnival. You dodge one, still chewing a bit of stolen bacon you're not proud of but not sorry enough to spit out. A tall man in muddy boots slaps a document on the table, appointment as postmaster of Natchez, signed by Jackson himself, but dated tomorrow. Mrs. Meggs squints. "Time traveler, are ya?" The man blushes the color of undercooked ham and retreats. Pole whistles the first bars of "Hail to the Chief," off-key, just to watch the man flinch harder. Jackson enters unnoticed at first, coat off, shirt sleeves rolled like he's ready to arm wrestle the nation. When he clears his throat, the room freezes mid-motion. Potatoes suspended, mouths open, cheese-scented breath collectively held. He scans the scene, eyes settling on the Parrot. "Professor, behave." Pole answers with a phrase questioning the legitimacy of Whig ancestry. Several petitioners nod before realizing they're the Whigs in question. The president waves dismissal. The crowd scatters like marbles on a warship. He turns to Mrs. Meggs. "How many today?" She tallies on her ladle handle. 63 beggars, 2 thieves, 1 poet who offered a sonnet for ham." Jackson sighs, rubs the bridge of his nose, an early rehearsal for the portrait that will one day grace $20 bills nobody bothers to read. You consider slipping out, but the general notices. "Stranger, hungry." He tears a hunk of bread, slaps cheese inside, hands it over before you can invent dietary restrictions. The sandwich is history on a plate, creamy, pungent, slightly corrupt. You chew respectfully. Pole hops to Jackson's shoulder, whispers something that makes him snort. "Yes," he tells the bird, "they'll eat us out of house and office." A clerk arrives with a list, customs collectors, surveyors, ambassadors to places nobody can spell. Jackson grabs a quill, approves, denies, occasionally asks, "Will he fight?" Loyalty trumps talent. The cheese model of governance. Cut a slice for friends. Let the rind protect the rest. You watch ink flow like dark gravy over parchment, aware you're witnessing the birth of the spoils system, democracy's less photogenic twin. Mrs. Meggs offers the president coffee thick as politics. He drinks, grimaces, drinks again. "Better than the stuff at Gadsby's," he declares, though it might be praise or threat. Pole demands a sip, receives it black, beak clacking against porcelain. He follows with a word that questions the parentage of coffee beans. The clerk nearly drops the appointments ledger. Outside the window, ordinary citizens still queue along the fence, clutching letters sealed with wax and hope. You imagine their kitchens, cold hearths, thin breakfasts, thin futures. Inside, fruit spoils faster than decisions. Peaches browning like bruises, bananas surrendering to gravity. The metaphor sits heavy, but so does the cheese in your stomach. Idealism is easier on an empty gut. Jackson signs the final name, tosses the quill down like a spent weapon. "Feed 'em," he orders, meaning both bellies and ambitions. Mrs. Meggs salutes with her ladle, begins carving cheese into democratic portions. Pole supervises, occasionally translating calorie counts into insults. You slip a small piece of overripe peach into your pocket, souvenir of excess, then edge toward the servant's passage. Before you vanish, you hear the president tell the Parrot, "Remember, Professor, every gift tastes like obligation." Pole answers with a syllable that rhymes with gift, but means something far less printable. Something that will still echo decades from now at a funeral where language itself will wear mourning black. The kitchen flagstones soften into the swaying floor of a mud-splattered stagecoach lurching westward under a sky the color of wet parchment. It's spring 1837. Jackson's final ride home as ex-president, the nation's capital glad to see the back of its most famous cursing companion. You sit opposite the general, knees touching a leather dispatch case stuffed with farewell letters and half-finished grudges. Pole rides in a wicker cage suspended from the coach ceiling, tail feathers brushing the roof whenever the wheels find a rut. Each jolt squeezes a new oath from him, like a squeaky toy manufactured by pirates. Jackson pretends to read a newspaper but smirks every time the Parrot improvises. You suspect he counts the curses the way other men count miles. Outside, Virginia hills scroll past like slow-loading web pages. Every milepost waves a number, distance to Nashville, distance to irrelevance, distance to the grave. The coach interior smells of wool, gun oil, and presidential athlete's foot, an intimacy no textbook grants. You breathe through your mouth, pretending it's strategy rather than disgust. At a roadside the driver changes horses, passengers stretch legs and bladders. Jackson offers you a piece of hardtack from his pocket, hardtack that could double as shingles. You gnaw politely, wonder how many teeth the man has left to risk. Pole receives a grape from the innkeeper's daughter and responds by questioning the lineage of her pigtails. She giggles, unaware she's been insulted by history. Back aboard, the road worsens, ruts deep enough to hide minor legislation. Each bump ricochets Pole off the cage bars. He retaliates with commentary so colorful it could dye yarn. Jackson finally lowers his paper. Professor, save breath for the speeches. The Parrot answers by suggesting where speeches might be stored. The general exhales through his nose, half annoyance, half pride. Night creeps in through cracked leather curtains. The coach lamps gutter, throwing jittery halos on the passengers' faces. You, Jackson, a young clerk from the Treasury, and a widow returning to Kentucky with a carpetbag full of unanswered letters. The clerk tries polite conversation, something about national banks. But every time he says fiscal responsibility, Pole supplies an ad-lib that rhymes. Soon the man pretends to sleep, cheeks crimson as new currency. You doze fitfully, lulled by wheel clatter and avian lullabies. Sometime after midnight, you wake to find Jackson awake too, staring at his own reflection in the dark window. Candlelight ghosts across his face, carving trenches you hadn't noticed before. He whispers, not to you, not to anyone. Rachel would have laughed at that bird. The sentence hangs, receives no echo. A wheel hits a rock. The coach lurches. Pole swings wildly, screeches a word that questions the rock's maternal origin. Jackson steadies the cage with one hand, uses the other to massage the bullet still lodged near his lung, a souvenir from the duel that keeps migrating like a metal glacier. You hear the soft grind of lead against bone and feel suddenly tender toward imperfection. Dawn arrives bleary and butter-colored. The landscape has shifted from Virginia farmland to Tennessee forest, hickory, oak, and the occasional stubborn pine leaning over the road like nosy neighbors. Jackson straightens his collar, clears his throat. Home soon, he tells Pole, as if the bird needed reminding. Pole responds with a triumphant syllable that rhymes with home, but means something far less sentimental. At a toll gate, the keeper recognizes the ex-president, doffs his cap, refuses payment. Jackson insists, citing the national debt. The man finally accepts a coin but asks for a story in return. Jackson obliges, brief, sharp, half self-mythology, half punchline. Pole supplies sound effects. Laughter ripples through the gatehouse. Even the harnessed horses flick ears in amusement. You realize legend is portable. It travels well in small compartments. Back inside, the road smooths. Nashville's mud awaits. Jackson grows quieter, fingers drumming the dispatch case the way a preacher tests a pulpit. You sense anticipation braided with dread, the hero returning, unsure whether the village will cheer or simply stare at the gaps in his armor. You know the feeling. Every homecoming risks discovering the place has moved on without you. Pole preens, then delivers a new construction, 3 curses in sequence, grammatically correct, almost poetic. Jackson listens, nods approval. "That's it, Professor, save some for the funeral." He chuckles, but the sound is brittle, like dry leaves reading their own obituary. The coach crests a final hill. Below, the Cumberland River glints, and beyond it, the Hermitage's white columns glow like teeth in the morning light. Jackson inhales, presses a hand to his aching ribs, and prepares to meet the remainder of his life. You clutch the 2 feathers in your pocket, one from the library, one from the toll gate, and ready yourself for whatever syllables tomorrow demands. The coach rattles to a halt beneath the Hermitage portico, but before the dust settles, time tilts you sideways. The manicured lawn blurs into a harsher green, cotton fields stretching like an unspoken accusation under July sun. It's still 1837, just a few hundred yards from the big house, yet the air is thicker, tasting of sap, sweat, and something metallic you wish you couldn't name. You stand between 2 rows, leaves brushing your calves like hands that have given up asking. Enslaved workers move ahead of you, hose rising and falling in a rhythm older than the Constitution. The sound is soft steel on earth, a heartbeat that refuses to skip. No one speaks. The field itself does the talking, and its vocabulary is relentless. Pole is here too, freed from his travel cage, perched on a scarecrow whose burlap face holds no opinion. Every so often the parrot squawks a word he learned in the coach, something sharp that slices the humid air. A woman about your age glances up, eyes flicking from bird to you to the distant white columns. Her expression says she's heard worse in every language that matters. Jackson appears at the field edge, broad-brimmed hat shading his scarred cheek. He's explaining yields to an overseer, voice carrying on hot wind. 2 bales an acre if we whip the dew off by dawn. The word whip lands casually, like a playing card face down. You feel it strike your spine, wonder if language itself can leave welts. The overseer nods, notebook in hand, tallying pounds of cotton and ounces of humanity with the same graphite stroke. You try to catch his eye, maybe telegraph 21st century disapproval, but he looks through you the way time looks through tourists, present, irrelevant. A child carries water down the row, tin cups clinking like tiny chains. She offers you one. The water tastes of cedar and effort. You nod thanks. She shrugs. Manners are for the living, survival for the enduring. Overhead, Pole practices a new phrase, something about property rights. The words feel obscene here, syllables rubbing salt into soil already salted by injustice. Jackson walks the furrow, boots pressing fresh prints beside older ones made by bare feet. You notice his heel strike is identical to the boot prints you followed through Kentucky blood and East Room carpets. Same determination, different cost. History rhymes on purpose, but nobody asked the chorus if they wanted to sing. The woman you noticed earlier straightens, presses a hand to her lower back. Sweat darkens her calico in Rorschach shapes that might spell freedom if viewed from sufficient altitude, but altitude is for birds and guards. Pole flaps to a nearer fence post, tilts his head. "Work, work," he comments helpfully. She ignores him, but you catch the micro flinch. Every command stings, even accidental. Jackson stops beside her, asks about her sick baby. Voice softer now, almost paternal. She answers, eyes down. Fever broke, master. He nods, tells the overseer to cut her evening quota. Charity, measured in pounds of cotton, handed down like mercy from a height. You want to feel gratitude, but gratitude sticks in your throat like dry bread. A horn blows, dinner break. Workers file toward shade. Conversation flickers alive, low and layered, full of codes you don't possess. A man hums a tune. Another answers with a counter rhythm on a tin pan. Music disguised as rest, seeds of spirituals planted in scorched rows. Pole attempts harmony, produces instead a whistle that sounds like a steamboat in mourning. Nobody laughs, but shoulders relax a fraction. You drift to the fence line where iron shackles hang from a post, waiting for night or insubordination, whichever arrives first. They're lighter than you expect, rust flaking like dead skin. One cuff still bears a name scratched inside, Lucy. You run a thumb over the letters, feeling the burr of crude tool on softer metal, aware you're touching evidence that will outlast testimony. Footsteps. Jackson. He stops, sees you holding the shackle, expression unreadable. For a heartbeat you fear interrogation, but he merely says, "Careful, stranger." Rust poisons blood. He moves on, boots clinking against chain links lying in the dirt, percussion section to a song no one chose. The sun tilts, cotton balls glow like dim lanterns. You realize every fiber you'll wear in centuries ahead carries ghost fingerprints, that your comfort has roots in these rows. Pole lands on your shoulder, unusually gentle. "Sorry," he whispers. Whether mimicry or original thought, you can't tell. You stroke his neck. Feathers feel fragile like justice. Dusk approaches, fireflies punctuation marks in a run on sentence. Workers line up for tally. You watch numbers enter a ledger, watch lives reduced to hash marks, watch the future being balanced on backs. The woman with the sick baby receives her reduced quota. She nods gratitude, but her eyes hold storms. You pocket a single cotton leaf, soft as debt, sharp as memory. Jackson calls for the horse. He'll ride home before full dark. Pole lifts off your shoulder, returns to the general like a conscience that prefers familiar cages. As they leave, dust rises, hangs, settles over leaves, over chains, over you. Somewhere in the settling, you understand the Parrot's future curses already contain this soil, this sweat, this unpaid balance. Dusk over the cotton field folds into lamplight on a 4-poster bed, 1840. You're back inside the Hermitage, but the wallpaper smells different, vinegar, camphor, and the metallic tang of fear. Andrew Jackson lies propped on pillows like a battle flag, too tired to wave. His shirt is open, ribs exposed, the old dual bullet now a blue lump migrating beneath the skin. Beside the bed, a physician in funereal black arranges tools, lancets, brass bleeding bowl, and a squat jar of leeches, each segment glistening like a tiny accordion of appetite. Pole watches from a wall sconce, head cocked in scientific interest. You hover near the footboard, barefoot on turkey carpet, trying not to breathe like a tourist. "Humors are imbalanced," the doctor declares, as if the body were a government overrun by spoilsmen. He selects a leech with silver tweezers. The creature wriggles, offended by bureaucracy. Jackson shrugs consent. He's bled before, by British steel, by Creek warriors, by political enemies. Why not by professional worms? The leech fastens onto the presidential ribcage, settles, begins its silent supper. You feel your own side itch in sympathy. Pole leans closer, whispers, "Sucker," with perfect medical accuracy. Jackson chuckles, then coughs, a wet, rattling sound like gravel poured down a well. The doctor frowns, adds another leech, aiming for symmetry or at least plausible deniability. A servant enters with a stoneware jug, Monongahela rye, Jackson's preferred painkiller and personality enhancer. The president waves for a tumbler, drinks, sighs lava. He offers some to the physician. The man declines, citing temperance or malpractice premiums. Pole accepts a droplet on a saucer, sips, whistles approval, then utters a new phrase linking distilled spirits to eternal damnation. Everyone pretends not to hear, including History. While the leeches dine, Jackson dictates a letter, protest against the National Bank, peppered with personal asides about Biddle's ancestry. The clerk's hand trembles, whether from proximity to power or the smell of blood is unclear. You read upside down, phrases about hydra of corruption, moneyed aristocracy, and a parenthetical wondering if Biddle ever met an honest day's work. Ink splatters, accidental bullet points. The doctor checks progress. Leeches now resemble small black sausages. The bowl beneath gathers a slow ruby drip. You feel dizzy, modern sensibilities staging a sit-in. Jackson notices, offers whiskey. You decline with a headshake that feels wobbly. He shrugs, more for the professionals, and downs another finger, chasing it with a grimace that might be pain or politics. Pole flies to the bedside table, investigates the pillbox. Calomel, jalap, laudanum. He pushes a mercury tablet onto the floor. It rolls like a tiny silver planet, toxic and tempting. The doctor retrieves it, scolds the bird. Pole responds by questioning the doctor's diploma, Latin declensions and all. Even Jackson winces at the grammar. An hour passes. Leeches detach, satiated, and are deposited into a secondary jar labeled used, do not reuse. You wonder if they keep presidential memories, if their next patient will dream of duels and bank vetoes. The physician applies a poultice of mustard and egg white, wraps the torso in linen, declares victory over invisible humors. Jackson thanks him, voice rasping like a file on iron. Night deepens, the household retires. You remain, unseen valet of the morbid. Jackson motions weakly. Stranger, fetch the bird. You comply, opening the cage latch. Pole hops onto the quilt, walks the ridge of the presidential knee, and delivers a soft chirrup, the closest he comes to compassion. Jackson strokes the green neck, whispers, "Sing me something, Professor." Pole considers, then lets out a low, mournful rendition of My Old Kentucky Home, each note slightly off-pitch, like memory itself. Halfway through, he inserts a whispered curse against death, soft as a lullaby. Jackson closes his eyes, either asleep or practicing. You back away, careful not to step on the bloody rug, aware you've witnessed a country's icon reduced to flesh, whiskey, and borrowed feathers. Outside the sickroom, candles flicker like approval ratings. You pocket a dropped leech, now dried into a tiny black comma, proof that even presidents are edited by time. Behind the door, breathing steadies, the bird mutters one last oath, and the house settles into an uneasy truce with mortality. The sickroom lamps dim, the walls melt into rain-loud darkness, and you're outside, barefoot on wet veranda boards, night air electric with a storm that hasn't decided whether to arrive or just threaten dramatically. It's summer 1841. The Hermitage is asleep, except for Jackson, Pole, and whatever deity handles Tennessee weather. Lightning scribbles across the horizon, quick white signatures on black paper. Thunder follows, a bass drum played by someone with infinite arm strength. Pole is balanced on the balustrade, feathers puffed, eyes reflecting each flash like tiny camera obscuras. He loves storms, Finally, drama that matches his vocabulary. Jackson stands beneath a massive tulip poplar 50 yards away, coat flung open, hat abandoned. The tree is older than the Republic, trunk scarred by lightning of centuries past, an arboreal veteran. Rain starts, fat drops that thud like small coins. You descend the steps, mud oozing between toes warm as fresh bread. The general looks up into the roar, arms slightly out as if welcoming an old enemy. You remember he once invited bullets. Weather must feel democratic by comparison. A bolt forks, one prong kissing the poplar's crown. The tree answers with a crack loud enough to reset bones. Sparks shower, pole imitates musket fire, perfect sound design for a war that exists only in memory. Jackson doesn't flinch. Instead he speaks, soft, meant for the storm, but you catch pieces. Take me if you want, leave the house. The bargain of a man who spent decades bargaining with worse odds. Wind whips his hair into white banners, rain pastes shirt to skin, outlining the rib where the bullet still camps. You reach the tree, place a palm on bark that feels like frozen lava. The trunk vibrates, sap, electricity, heartwood under siege. Another crack, a limb the size of a canal boat splinters, swings, crashes to earth inches from Jackson. He steps aside casually, as if falling timber were merely social call. Pole screams approval, vocabulary unprintable even in storm language. Lightning reveals faces in the wood, Creek warriors, Rachel Young, Dickinson falling, Union soldiers not yet born. You blink, they vanish, replaced by running sap that smells of pepper and pine. Somewhere inside the tree, beetles pause their tunneling, unsure whether Armageddon requires evacuation. A final bolt stabs, brighter than cabinet meetings. The poplar shudders, splits down the middle, two halves leaning apart like arguments that realize they'll never reconcile. The interior smells of rain-soaked centuries, green heartwood exposed like fresh wound. Jackson exhales, something between disappointment and relief. The storm accepted a substitute. Rain eases to drizzle. Thunder trots off toward Kentucky. You stare at the bisected giant, sap mixing with rainwater into pale rivers at your feet. Pole flies to the jagged summit, perches on raw wood, and delivers a eulogy composed of one long, rolling curse that ends in laughter. Even Jackson chuckles, shakes his head. Show some respect, Professor. The bird answers with a whistle that mimics distant thunder, softer now, almost tender. The general turns, notices you for the first time tonight. Eyes reflect lightning afterglow, pupils still wide from bargaining with infinity. Tree owed me, he says, voice hoarse from shouting or from swallowing fear. You nod, unsure if debt is paid or merely deferred. Together you walk back toward the house, mud sucking at boots and bare feet alike. Behind you, the poplars too halves creak, settling into new careers as monuments to near misses. Sap continues to drip, ticking off seconds until rot or resurrection. On the veranda, Jackson pauses, wrings rainwater from his shirt tail. Storm took what it could, he mutters, left the rest for time. Pole adds an amen in the form of a whispered profanity, soft as lullaby. You pocket a wet splinter, lightning singed, sap sticky, evidence that even giants can split when the sky grows tired of waiting. Inside, candles relight one by one, house waking to check its pulse. You leave the man and bird to their towels and whiskey, aware you've witnessed a negotiation nobody recorded, a president, a storm, and a parrot who speaks for both thunder and mortality. Morning after the storm finds you back on the Hermitage veranda, but the air is different, formaldehyde tinted, linen crisp. It's June 1845, and the house has rearranged itself into a showroom of endings, black crepe-over mirrors, chairs pushed against walls as if making room for an idea too large to seat. Jackson's body lies cold one room away, and the staff moves with the hushed choreography of people who have rehearsed for inevitability. Pole is missing, again. You hear him before you see him, a green blur above the porch ceiling, weaving through joists like a drunk bell ringer. Every circuit drops plaster dust onto mourning hats below. A cousin swears under her breath. The word is mild, almost nostalgic compared to the Parrot's syllabus. Inside, the casket has already been moved to the parlor's center, lid propped open like a question mark nobody wants to read to the end. White roses from the garden heap the interior, scent so sweet it feels argumentative against the smell of beeswax and human absence. You step closer. Jackson looks smaller, as though death is a tailor who alters without asking. The famous bullet lump is gone, removed by Undertaker's putty, and the face is peaceful in a way life refused to grant. An Undertaker's assistant, gangling, adolescent, approaches with a small key. "Time to close, sir," he murmurs, mistaking you for kin. You nod, step aside. The lid descends, screws turn with tiny shrieks that set teeth on edge. Somewhere in the attic, Pole answers each turn with escalating commentary. Guests exchange glances, grief mixed with second-hand embarrassment. You volunteer to find the bird, partly to escape the claustrophobia of finalized faces, partly because you've become unofficial interpreter of feathered ID. Through hallways scented with rosewater and regret, you follow the cursing, down the back stair, past the library where grammar once bled into letters, into the summer kitchen where jars of pickled grief line the shelves. Pole perches on a ham hook, wings drooping, vocabulary still impressive but tone softer, like someone shouting into a pillow. You extend a forearm, he steps aboard, surprising you with compliance. His breast trembles against your wrist, small earthquake of confusion. "Gone," he says, voice eerily matching Jackson's timbre. The word feels too large for the room. Back in the parlor, the funeral party assembles, family in bombazine, neighbors in Sunday black, politicians in freshly rented sorrow. The casket now rides a black draped bier like a float in a parade nobody RSVP'd to. Pole observes from your shoulder, mercifully mute except for the occasional click of beak, a metronome counting measures of silence. The minister arrives, Bible already open to a ribbon-wilted page. He eyes the Parrot, mouth tightening into a hyphen. You offer a small nod that tries to say, "I'll keep him contained," though both of you know better. The Reverend begins, "I am the resurrection and the life." His voice is steady, but sweat beads at his collar. Whether from June heat or anticipated avian interruption is unclear. Outside, clouds stack like unmailed letters. Thunder mutters, storm remembering its lines. You notice the split tulip poplar through the window, one half still upright, one half supine, both sprouting new leaves that ignore mortality schedules. Life, like Pole, persists in finding places to perch. The service proceeds, psalms, sniffles, the soft thud of dirt clods on coffin lid rehearsal, because tomorrow the grave will receive its permanent guest. Pole remains quiet, head cocked as if transcribing scripture for future commentary. You breathe shallow, aware that each inhale drags in equal parts rose, beeswax, and the faint salt of human tears. When the minister invites final viewing, the crowd files past, each mourner pausing to touch wood the way sailors touch dock one last time. You hang back, letting them pass. Pole suddenly leans toward the casket, whispers, soft as dust, something you can't catch. It might be Amen. It might be Arsenal. Either way, the room exhales, and the lid stays closed. The funeral cortege spills onto the side lawn. A black and white daguerreotype come reluctantly to life. Women in bombazine glide like chess pieces unsure of their next square. Men in stovepipe hats provide the vertical punctuation. You linger on the fringe, barefoot in dew-cooled grass, pole steady on your shoulder, an emerald brooch nobody requested. Clouds have lowered to a breathable height. Humidity wraps every cheek in moist gauze. A fiddler tunes softly, uncertain whether music is welcome at so somber a picnic. He settles on a low drone that mimics distant thunder, polite enough to cry to. You feel the vibration in your ankles, a sympathetic tremor. Neighbors swap whispers flavored with corn liquor and speculation. Shot 20 men, loved his Rachel to madness, couldn't keep that bird civil. Each sentence ends in a quick glance at Pole, who repays the attention by questioning their lineage in 3 syllables, baritone perfect for hush. A few gasps, a few half-suppressed laughs. Griefs seem ripped slightly, revealing bright petticoats of absurdity beneath. The family forms a receiving line beside the coffin, now centered on a raised platform draped in black cambric. You study their faces, nephew Andrew Jr. Trying on gravitas 2 sizes too large. Daughter-in-law Sarah managing tears and guest logistics simultaneously. Clipboard hidden in her skirt folds. Cousins rehearsing legacy like lines for a play that might never close. An elderly woman, Rachel's former seamstress, approaches the casket clutch a thimble like a ticket for admission. She presses it to the wood, lips moving in silent promise to stitch whatever heaven has torn. Pole watches, head cocked, and for once holds commentary. You feel the moment settle, soft as dandelion seed, dangerous as pollen on a wound. A politician you recognize from daguerreotypes, name escapes. Mustache insists, works the crowd, shaking one hand while the other clasps a document, probably a request for posthumous endorsement. Even death, you realize, has an appointments desk. Pole greets him with a phrase linking banks and barnyard anatomy. The man blanches, retreats towards safer constituents near the lemonade. Children dart between skirts, playing some variant of tag that substitutes ghost for it. Their laughter rings like dropped silver, quickly scooped up by scolding ants. One little boy stops at your feet, stares at the parrot. "Does he know any prayers?" he asks. Before you can frame diplomacy, Pole recites the opening of the Lord's Prayer, then appends speculation about where hypocrites can store their offerings. The boy giggles, runs off to share new scripture. The minister reappears, Bible now closed, sweat shining at temples like tiny pulpits. He announces a procession to the garden for the final ceremony. Chairs scrape, fabric rustles, black crepe swishes like a classroom of flags at half-mast. You fall in step, part of the tide but still salt-sprayed outsider. Pole grows heavier, as though absorbing collective weight. He whispers, almost in your ear, a single word, home. It's Jackson's voice again, timbre perfect, affection unmistakable. You feel the feather in your pocket warm against your thigh, sympathetic metal. At the garden gate, pallbearers lift the coffin, muscles tense, veins map forearms like river routes to somewhere better. They move slow, measuring steps against eternity. You bring up the rear, bird on shoulder, aware that every footfall presses another layer onto the archaeological sandwich of American myth. A bee lands on a lapel, decides black isn't festive, buzzes off. Thunder far away rehearses a speech it may never deliver. Someone sobs. Single note, pure, quickly swallowed. Pole stays silent, head bowed, green among the blacks, a comma in a very long sentence about loss. The garden path stops at a canvas pavilion pitched over a rectangular hole, raw earth dressed in morning lawn. Chairs form a semicircle like parentheses around silence. Pallbearers lower the casket onto webbing straps. The sound is a soft exhalation, final and fabric. You slip into the back row, pole still aboard your shoulder, feathers damp with atmospheric grief. The minister mounts a small wooden dais, Bible balanced like a ledger he's ready to close. He clears his throat, an announcement, a warning, a last chance for decorum. He begins, "Man that is born of a woman hath but a short time to live." Voice steady, cadence rehearsed. Pole listens, head tilted as if auditing metaphysics. "Halfway through ashes to ashes," the parrot mutters. "Dust to D." The missing syllable rhymes with am. It's quiet but unmistakable, like a foul odor in velvet drawing room. The minister's eyes flick upward, meet yours, then the bird's. His left eyebrow performs a small semaphore of outrage. He continues, louder, as if volume can carpet over profanity. Pole responds by questioning the genealogical legitimacy of entire theological schools. Several mourners cough into handkerchiefs that are suddenly too small to hide laughter. Children turn, wide-eyed, repeating the new word under their breath, etymologists in miniature. Mothers pinch arms. Fathers study hymnals with forensic interest. The minister raises both voice and hand. "Let us pray." Pole complies by reciting the opening of the Lord's Prayer, then appends commentary on collection plate security. Even Jackson's nephew snorts. You consider retreat, but movement feels theatrical. Instead, you cover the bird's beak with 2 fingers, gently, the way one pauses a music box. Pole licks your thumb, stays quiet for 3 whole seconds, long enough for the minister to gain ground. Sure and certain hope of the resurrection, thunder, actual thunder, rolls overhead, timely as a sound effect. The minister glances skyward, perhaps wondering if the Almighty is critiquing his sermon in real time. Pole seizes the distraction, whistles the first bars of "My Country, 'Tis of Thee," key uncertain, sentiment undeniable. A few voices join. Hymn becomes karaoke. The minister presses on, face shining with sweat and vocational crisis. He skips 2 pages, lands on committal, earth to earth, dust to dust. Pole squawks earth in echo, then adds an adjective inappropriate for soil. The minister's composure cracks. You see the exact moment he chooses forgiveness over homicidal impulse. He closes with a hasty amen, steps backward off the dais, nearly into the grave. A cousin catches his elbow, saves clerical dignity and possibly collarbone. Mourners rise, unsure whether to applaud, pray, or flee. The casket waits, patient as furniture, while humanity sorts its reactions. Jackson's nephew approaches you, whisper, hiss. "Can't you silence that creature?" You shrug, partly apologetic, partly aware the creature has been silent more years than not. Pole offers the nephew a consolation prize, speculation on the nephew's investment choices and marital odds. The man retreats to safer gene pools. Gravediggers step forward, hats in hand, awaiting cue. The minister, regaining color, gestures weakly. Straps creak, the coffin descends. Earth begins its slow applause, handfuls of dirt hitting wood like muted clapping. Pole bows his head, finally grave. Pun unintended, irresistible. You toss the single green feather you've carried since the library. It spirals down, lands on the lid, bright as a signature no clerk will file. For a heartbeat, the only sound is dirt, soft, persistent, final. Then the minister exhales, part relief, part surrender. He glances at the parrot one last time, expression unreadable, something between benediction and restraining order. The crowd begins to disperse, black figures drifting across green like chess pieces realizing the game ended several moves ago. Pole stays quiet, perhaps aware even outrage needs a closing curtain. You remain until the last cloud falls, aware you've witnessed a new layer added to legend, the sermon hijacked by a bird who speaks for every voice history forgot to censor. The final cloud of earth has barely settled when etiquette collapses like a cheap umbrella. A distant cousin, 3 whiskeys deep and armed with a sprig of magnolia, decides the coffin needs floral garnish. He lurches forward, trips on a strap, and flings white petals into the grave like celebratory rice. They land on the feather you dropped, instantly funereal confetti. Pole, revived by commotion, shouts, "For!" A golf term that won't exist for 50 years, proving the bird is not only profane but prophetic. The crowd gasps in polyphonic harmony. The cousin dangles halfway over the pit, caught by 2 quick gravediggers who haul him up, boots scraping clay in a duet of near disaster. Children break ranks, chasing the scattered magnolia like it's parade candy. One little boy skids, lands on his rear, begins to cry, then laughs when Pole Wolf whistles approval. Parents swoop in, scooping offspring and dignity simultaneously. An elderly aunt fans herself so vigorously her bonnet takes flight, landing crown first on the coffin lid like a surrendering spaceship. The minister, already teetering on the cliff of pastoral composure, raises both arms. "Order, beloved." Pole interrupts with a theory about where order can store itself, anatomically. Laughter ripples, irreverent, unstoppable. Someone claps, applause spreads, uncertain whether it's for the rescue, the sermon, or the sheer relief of feeling anything other than sorrow. Jackson's nephew attempts crowd control. "Have you no respect?" The question hangs, rhetorical and doomed. A neighbor answers by blowing his nose into a bandana monogrammed AJ. Souvenir from the inaugural riot 16 years prior. Even the nephew succumbs to a smile that fights like a kite in crosswind. You move to the grave's edge, meaning to retrieve the aunt's bonnet before dirt claims it. Pole beats you, swooping down, snatching the hat brim, flapping back up. He perches on the pavilion crossbeam and drops the bonnet directly onto your head. It fits poorly, sits high like a cake left out in humidity. Laughter crescendos. You bow, courtier at the court of mortality. Lightning, far away but visible, scribbles across bruised clouds, nature's punctuation mark after a run on joke. Thunder grumbles, as if the sky itself wants the last word but can't decide which. The gravediggers seize opportunity, shoveling faster, turning the grave into urgent project. Dirt hits the bonnet-shaped dent in the lid, erasing last evidence of absurdity. A final indignity, the cousin who started the chaos now produces a handkerchief full of earth, intending a ceremonial toss. He swings, handkerchief knots, soil stays put, momentum carries him forward. He lands on his knees at the brink, hat tumbling in after him. Applause turns to groan. Pole supplies rim-shot whistle. 2 men drag the penitent cousin away. He's sobbing now, partly from shame, mostly from whiskey leaving the building. His tears fall on the grass, tiny private burials. The laughter quiets, embarrassed by its own echo. Even the parrot lowers volume, muttering, "Enough," in Jackson's rasp. Order, fragile, floral strewn, reassembles. The minister, Barnet less but determined, intones a hurried closing prayer. People bow heads, grateful for script. Shovels continue, softer, respectful taps now, dirt falling like muted applause after a play that forgot its genre. You remove the Barnet, hand it to the aunt. She nods, too tired to scold. Pole lands on your shoulder again, unusually heavy, as if loaded with the entire scene. The crowd begins the slow drift toward the house, toward cold ham, toward conversations that will start with "Did you see?" and end in awkward laughter for decades. Behind them, gravediggers finish leveling, erasing chaos with neat rectangle of earth. The feather you dropped is gone, claimed by soil, by gravity, by the need for something bright in all that brown. You linger until the first spatter of rain returns, sky's quiet suggestion that performance is over. The drizzle thickens to a steady hiss, driving mourners toward the house in a black-clad migration. You linger under the canvas awning, Barnet now returned, rain stippling your shoulders like cold pin-pricks. Pole remains unusually calm. Perhaps even prophets recognize when the curtain is falling. Two stable hands approach, caps in hand, eyes on the Parrot as if he's overdue books they've been sent to collect. "Miss Sarah's orders," one explains to you, polite but firm. "The birds to wait out the rest in the summer kitchen, away from decent folk." Pole mutters "decent" with audible quotation marks. The men flinch but hold ground. You stroke the green neck, whisper pointless thanks for his commentary. He answers by imitating the exact creak of the coffin lid, sound effect too precise for comfort. Then, surprisingly gentle, he steps onto the foreman's wrist, allowing himself to be carried. Maybe even anarchists tire of their own chaos. The walk is short, across the wet lawn, past the kitchen garden where mint and regret grow with equal vigor. Inside the summer kitchen, air smells of last winter's smoke and yesterday's bread. They hang the cage from a ceiling hook usually reserved for hams. Pole tests the latch, finds it secure, and offers a final syllable that questions the structural integrity of the entire building. The men retreat, locking the door behind them, avian security protocol. Through the window you watch the main house, windows glowing amber, silhouettes passing to and fro like thoughts in a brain processing grief. Inside, ham is carved, whiskey poured, anecdotes uncorked. You imagine laughter spilling into hallways, mixing with rosewater and candle smoke, life insisting on overtime. Rain drums on the kitchen roof, a percussion section missing its conductor. Pole paces, talons clicking wicker, occasionally whispering fragments of prayers, curses, and what might be the opening of a campaign speech. You sit on a flour barrel, content to be audience of one. An hour slips by. Voices from the big house fade, replaced by carriage wheels sucking through mud as guests depart. Eventually the key turns. Sarah Jackson enters, eyes red, posture held together by mourning pins. She nods at you, then addresses the cage. "You've had your say, Professor. The general's gone. Let him rest." Pole meets her gaze, tilts head, and offers, soft as dust, the general's own nickname for her, "Sally, my Sally." Her hand flies to mouth. Tears escape, but she nods permission for the bird to stay indoors tonight, parole granted. She leaves. You and Pole listen to the house settle, joints creaking like old political alliances. The rain eases to a whisper, then to silence. Somewhere a clock strikes 9. The sound is muffled, as if time itself is wearing crepe. Pole finally perches still, eyes half closed, muttering the word home over and over, each repetition softer until it becomes a lullaby for furniture. You unlock the cage door. Latch easy, probably always was. Freedom offered, but the bird stays put, either tired or aware that escape into a world of storms and ministers is its own kind of cage. You leave the door ajar, a diplomatic compromise. Outside, the last carriage departs, lamps bobbing like hesitant stars. You pocket a shard of fallen plaster, white as unwritten headlines, and step into the wet night. Behind you, Pole's voice fades to a murmur, then to nothing, history finally agreeing to a commercial break. The Hermitage lawn breathes in long, wet sighs, grass blades recovering from the day's parade of boots, wheels, and whispered scandals. You wander away from the summer kitchen, leaving Pole to negotiate his open cage and whatever midnight truce he's reached with silence. Moonlight slicks the path like cooled pewter. Your bare feet print temporary autographs on the earth. Inside the big house, candles dim one by one, maids moving through rooms the way dentists extract dying nerves, gentle but final. You catch glimpses through sashes, a sleeve extinguishing flame, a silhouette kneading the small of its back, a yawn that has nothing to do with sleep and everything to do with finishing. The scent of ham and coffee drifts out, mixing with magnolia bruised by rain. Your stomach offers a polite reminder that grief is not a meal, but you ignore it. Some hungers are best left undisturbed. Instead, you follow the faint sound of the Cumberland River beyond the trees, a low shush as if the water itself is conducting a séance for the day's events. A bench appears, white iron, paint peeling like old gossip. You sit, listening to house sounds fade and world sounds grow, cicadas tuning their wing cases, dew sliding off leaves in silken threads, the soft after-rain hiccup of tree frogs. Somewhere a whippoorwill calls once, decides the audience is too sparse and cancels the rest of its set. Behind you, footsteps, soft, deliberate. You half expect Jackson's ghost, but it's only the teenage stable hand who earlier carried Pole. He nods, offers a dented flask. Corn for the corn, he says, meaning the general's favorite toast. You decline. He drinks, wipes mouth with the back of a wrist still smelling of horse. Reckon the bird'll live, he asks. You assure him Parrots outlast most regimes. He nods, satisfied, retreats into shadow. The moon drifts behind a cloud and darkness becomes a room without corners. You think of Pole alone in the kitchen, perhaps rehearsing tomorrow's headlines, perhaps asleep, if birds ever truly sleep. You wonder what dreams look like when your vocabulary was forged by war, love, and whiskey. Maybe every night he replays the same storm tree, the same sugar cube, the same whispered home. A breeze stirs. Leftover raindrops fall in random morse. You catch one on your tongue, tastes of iron, roses, and something electric. Somewhere inside the house, a door latches. The Hermitage signs off for the night. Even clocks have stopped clearing their throats, content to let the river keep time. You realize you're rocking slightly, bench protesting in tiny cricket chirps. The motion is soothing, parental, though you've never parented anything louder than a houseplant. Perhaps the evening has adopted you, needs rocking until its eyes close. In your pocket, the 2 feathers and the leech-dried karma of earlier seem to warm, souvenirs conducting their own small heartbeats. You consider leaving them on the bench, gifts for whoever sits next. But attachment wins. You'll need evidence that tonight happened once the century changes again. Far off, beyond the bend, a steamboat horn lows, one long note that could mean departure, arrival, or simply I'm still here. Pole's voice answers from inside the kitchen, faint but clear, still here. echo or reply, impossible to tell. You smile into darkness, aware the conversation between past and future rarely needs a translator. Eventually you rise, bench creaking goodbye. The house windows are dark now, mirrors reflecting moonlight back at the moon. You walk toward the garden gate, each step erasing and printing simultaneously. History's favorite magic trick. Behind you, quiet gathers like fabric settling after the final stitch. Dawn creeps in on cat feet, grey-pink and quiet as a held breath. You're back in the garden without knowing how you got there. Maybe the night carried you the way rumors travel, hand to hand, lighter at each exchange. Mist hovers waist-high, making every headstone and rosebush float like props in a theatre nobody's opened yet. Pole is waiting on the iron gate, preening dew from his wings. The cage door stands open behind him, avian Houdini who chose to stay. He eyes you, yawns a small click, and drops something, the second feather, green-rimmed with whiskey memory. It spirals, lands upright in the wet soil, impaled like a tiny pennant claiming territory for the ungovernable. You crouch, leave it there. Some signatures look truer when they stay in their own century. Instead you trade, pull the clove candy wrapper from yesterday's pocket, place it beside the feather, modernity's metallic confession. Pole tilts head, approves or marks. With birds the difference is mostly posture. Footsteps approach. Sarah Jackson, black dress already gathering workaday dust. She carries a pair of garden shears and the hollow eyes of someone who's hosted a party for grief. She nods at the feather, then at you. "Keep it," she says, voice soft as old lace. General always said memories weigh less if someone else carries part. You accept, unsure which of you needs the lighter load. She moves along the path, snipping wilted roses, letting petals fall wherever physics decides. Each snip sounds like a period at the end of a sentence no one will read aloud. Pole follows her progress from the gate, occasionally offering commentary on horticulture, none of it printable in seed catalogues. You wander toward the fresh grave. Earth is mounded, neat, already sprouting footprints like unauthorized biographies. No stone yet, just a wooden marker bearing the single word Andrew in carpentered capitals. You trace the air above it, aware that touching would be presumptuous. A beetle crosses the mound, black shell iridescent as oil on water. It pauses at the feather you left, investigates, moves on, critic unimpressed. Somewhere beneath, the real feather lies too, green against cedar, bright as a promised language forgot to keep. Behind you, the summer kitchen door creaks. Pole's head swivels, he flaps once, lands on your shoulder instead of investigating. Loyalty or laziness, again posture. Together you watch Sarah work her way back, apron pocket full of dead blooms. She stops beside you, eyes on the mound. "He'd hate the quiet," she says. Always needed noise to know he was alive. As if on cue, Pole whistles the first bar of Hail to the Chief, off-key but audible. Sarah smiles, small, surprised, grateful. "That'll do," she whispers, pats the bird, pats your arm, walks off toward chores that refuse to mourn on company time. You breathe in soil, roses, and something faintly metallic that might be legacy or might be rain preparing a second act. The feather in your pocket feels heavier than physics allows, as if loading itself with syllables. You consider planting it, wonder what tree might grow, something that swears in wind, perhaps, or simply shades travelers indifferent to fame. Instead, you leave the grave, leave the feather standing upright like a tiny green flag no nation would claim. Pole stays with you until the garden gate, then flaps back to the kitchen roof. Guardian or prisoner, same difference. You step onto the lane, not looking back, aware that some exits are kinder when taken barefoot. Someday a historian will catalogue every artifact, every footnote. They'll miss the candy wrapper, the beetle, the single feather left to compost into anecdote. That feels like victory. Small, green, unprintable. The lane leads you inside again, through a side door left ajar for cats, ghosts, and time travelers with quiet feet. The Hermitage inhales you, air thick as unshaken rugs. Walls hold yesterday's candle smoke in suspended custody. Every footstep lands like a librarian's cough. You drift past portraits, Rachel young, Rachel older, Rachel forever trying not to blink. Their eyes track you the way clocks track something slower than seconds. Pole is somewhere overhead, talons tapping rafters like a judge deciding sentence length. You don't call. Some company is better felt than seen. In the library, the globe still spins from last night's breeze through cracked window. You stop it with a finger, land on Tennessee naturally. The inkwell is dry, but a faint ring of whiskey ghosts the desktop, halo around absent glass. You smell leather, pipe dartle, and the metallic after breath of decisions. A single sheet remains in the tray, half-written letter to Van Buren, sentence abandoned mid-snarl. The bank, sir, is a monster which what? You wait for the quill to finish, it declines. The monster roams on which ed. You picture future textbooks arguing over the which, footnotes breeding like mice. Footsteps echo, your own, but the hallway throws them back like a jealous twin. You try walking softer, boards answer anyway, creaking Morse about strangers and weight distribution. Somewhere a clock clears its throat, strikes 11 though morning feels negotiable. Each chime lands in your ribs like a reminder to RSVP to your own life. You find the dining room, table set for 12, no one coming. Silver aligned with military precision, coffee congealed to obsidian mirror. You catch your reflection, barefoot, borrowed century clothes, eyes two questions arguing jurisdiction. The reflection salutes with a teaspoon. You decline promotion. Upstairs, the bed where he died is already stripped to mattress stripes, flag of a surrendered patient. The indentation remains, subtle as a promise you didn't witness but still believe. You sit on the edge, ropes creak approval or warning. From this angle the window frames a perfect portrait of the split poplar, one half living, one half not, both insisting on sky. A bureau drawer stands open, collar studs, a ribbon that once tied Rachel's braid, spectacles missing one lens, viewpoint literally half complete. You lift the spectacles, hold them to your eyes, the room blurs into impressionist dignity. Everything softens, blood, banks, bootprints. You return them, let clarity reassert its tyranny. Pole appears in the doorway, beak wiping dust from vocabulary. He doesn't enter, just watches, head cocked like a historian auditing context. You nod, he nods. Conversation accomplished. He flaps off, leaving a single down feather that drifts sideways, refuses gravity's hurry. You follow at human speed. The corridor bends toward the back stair, wallpaper fading in gradient of memories. Bright near windows, ghostly near corners, as if importance depends on daylight real estate. Every step feels like walking across a sentence you're still composing, unsure where the period goes. At the landing, a small portrait, Jackson in his 20s, eyes attempting to outstare the painter. Beneath it, on a nail, hangs his old sword belt, leather cracked, brass tarnished to verdigris moonlight. You touch the buckle. It's cold, but something pulses. Maybe your own heartbeat echoing through metal, maybe the echo of every charge he ever ordered. You leave the belt swinging, slight pendulum counting time that no longer belongs to clocks. Downstairs, the front door stands open, invitation or oversight, impossible to tell. Outside light is brighter, carrying on business without you. You step toward it, aware that hallways only stay empty if you keep walking. The open door exhales you onto a path of crushed oyster shells that click like polite castanets underfoot. Morning has firmed up. Sunlight drips through hickory leaves, each drop a tiny spotlight searching for its actor. You follow the lane downhill, past the garden gate where the single feather still stands impaled, trembling like a tuning fork no one has asked to perform. Pole circles overhead once, shadow crossing yours like a green eclipse, then banks toward the sound of water. You keep walking. Gravity and curiosity have formed a bipartisan committee. The trees part, and there it is, the Cumberland, wide and slow, the color of strong tea with a shot of cream. It moves with the confidence of something that has already forgotten every name it ever carried. A skiff is pulled up on the mud, paint peeling, oars shipped, nameboard reading Republic in flaking gold. You wonder if it ferries passengers or metaphors. With river craft, the difference is often nautical. You drag it down an inch, mud sighing like old upholstery. The feather in your pocket brushes your thumb, impatient for baptism. You push off, shells scraping hull, then silence except for oarlocks creaking. Each stroke writes a brief ellipsis that vanishes before syntax arrives. Midstream, current takes over. You let the blades rest, drifting like punctuation that has renounced grammar. Banks slide past, willow, sycamore, cottonwood, all auditioning for the role of tree in contemplative novel. Pole appears on the prow, arriving without sound, as if lifted by editorial need. He faces forward, wind parting feathers into green foam. Neither of you speaks. Rivers prefer monologue. Overhead, a red-tailed hawk circles higher, slower, until it becomes a pen and ink sketch of surveillance. Pole watches but withholds comment. Some audiences are best allowed silence. A log floats alongside, turtle perched like a captain who has misplaced his ship. You nod. He blinks, uninterested in anthropomorphism. The river carries him past, small sovereign on temporary throne. You wonder if logs feel nostalgia for forests the way men feel nostalgia for moments. Same wood, different context. Around the bend, the Hermitage roof appears above treetops. White column poking sky, monument to mortality and mortgages. From here it looks peaceful, innocent of duels, bank vetoes, and funeral curses. Distance edits aggressively. Pole glances back, whistles 2 notes, half goodbye, half see you soon, then faces forward again, committed to downstream. You dip an oar, steer toward a sandbar mid-river. Hull kisses sand with a sound like a book closing. You step out, ankles kissed by cool water, and pull the boat higher. The sand is littered with freshwater mussel shells, each inner surface iridescent as unwritten policy. You pocket one. It clacks against the leech-dried karma percussion section of your artifact orchestra. Pole hops onto sand, investigates tracks. Raccoon, deer, barefoot human centuries earlier. He pronounces verdict. Gone. The word floats, applicable to eras, to people, to birds who outlive their humans. You sit on a log, he joins, warm against your ribs, heartbeat rapid as typewriter. Across the water, Hermitage chimneys shrink with distance, becoming exclamation marks in a sentence whose subject has wandered off. You realize you are looking at the past the way the past looks at itself, half remembered, half invented, wholly temporary. Pole preens, then speaks softly, almost under breath. Home. Same word, new coordinates. You push the skiff back into current, climb aboard, let the river turn you around, north bank, southbound, because sometimes the only way to leave is to drift sideways. The oars rest, the river decides. Behind, the Hermitage disappears, taking with it every syllable ever uttered under its roof, leaving you with one green feather, one mussel shell, and a beak-worn lexicon no dictionary will ever acknowledge. The skiff finds a gentle eddy and spins, slow as a record run out of winding. Dusk arrives without announcement, just a thickening of river breath, air cooling from pewter to iron. You let the boat nudge a willow root, tie off with a half-learned knot that feels more like suggestion than commitment. Time to beach for the night. Pole hops onto a branch, tests twig reliability, decides philosophy requires height. You gather driftwood, each piece shaped by earlier voyages. Someone's roof beam, someone's cradle, now your campfire. Flame catches on the third spark, coughs smoke into branches already hosting fireflies. Their phosphorescent Morse blinks, all clear, or maybe keep out. Translation varies by century. Across the river, a steamboat lantern glides, one yellow eye surveying darkness it never quite believes. You listen to paddle wheels thresh water into lace, sound fading until only memory paddles. Pole whistles the rhythm back, softer, like echo practicing for retirement. Crickets start their shift. One bold soloist near your foot tests volume, finds audience sufficient, launches full orchestra. The chord is universal, same frequency that will hum under porch rockers in 14 decades, same soundtrack to whatever worries haven't been invented yet. You lie back on the sand, let the ground bass vibrate through shoulder blades. Above, stars leak through like candle holes poked in tin. You try counting. They refuse order, prefer gossip, that one saw the duel, that one watched the cheese rot, that one heard a parrot curse a president into legend. You give up math, listen instead. River joins crickets, low, constant, older than any republic. Somewhere in its hush you detect faint syllables, hellfire, democracy. Home, vocabulary dissolving into current, traveling to oceans that have no voting records. Pole descends, lands on your chest, warm as pocket change. Heartbeat to heartbeat, you match breaths. He does not speak, yet you feel language pass, syllables of sugar cubes, thunder over poplars, the soft thud of dirt on cedar. A final feather detaches, drifts onto your shirt, tip still carrying candlelight from a room where mirrors were once draped in black. You leave it there, temporary medal. A fox barks upstream, an owl answers with whole notes worthy of hymns. Between them, smaller sounds, leaf giving up its grip, fish kissing surface to taste moon, sand settling under your weight. 1845, and now negotiate border treaty inside your ear. No checkpoints, only overlap. Sleep tiptoes nearer, carrying its own soundtrack. Faint lullaby of oarlocks, distant piano from a riverboat salon, the soft after-rain drip of willow leaves practicing forgiveness. Pole's eyes close first. His breathing becomes whistle tiny, repertoire retired for the night. You follow, unaware where century ends and dream begins, content to let the river keep minutes. Last conscious note, the simultaneous throb of cricket and heartbeat, two drummers sharing one stage, neither willing to leave. You decide they don't have to. Time is wide enough for duets. Somewhere in that shared pulse, the word still repeats, still here, still now, still then, until meaning loosens and sleep claims the final measure. The cricket heartbeat lullaby thins until you feel it more than hear it. Night's pulse syncing with yours, slow, deliberate, like someone turning pages long after the story has ended. Somewhere between 1845 and the next breath, the campfire sinks to ember grammar, No verbs, only glowing nouns. Pole sleeps on your chest, a small rise and fall against the larger curve of river breathing. Each exhale leaves you lighter, as though history itself is climbing out of your lungs and taking its luggage. Above, the sky has rearranged into a pattern no flag has ever claimed. Loose constellation of maybe, almost, and soon. You think of the feather still resting over your heart, how it rode duels, duets, cheese riots, and funeral confetti without ever asking to be believed. It weighs nothing now. Soon it will weigh less. Your fingers find it, lift it, let it go. It doesn't drift. It hovers, caught by an updraft of residual warmth, then sails sideways into darkness, green disappearing into black like a secret rejoining its source. The river keeps its own counsel, surface holding starlight without swallowing. You imagine every syllable pole ever uttered floating downstream, hellfire, democracy, home. Words becoming water, becoming cloud, becoming rain on a grave you may never see again. The cycle feels complete, or complete enough to sleep through. Your eyelids lower like curtains that have decided the play is fine as is, no encore required. Behind them, colors soften, blood rust into rosewater, bullet lead into lilac, bank ink into river silt. Even the poplar's split trunk heals in the theater of almost dream, knitting itself around lightning like a scar that brags politely. Somewhere far off, maybe upstream, maybe tomorrow, a steamboat horn releases one note, long and patient, the way mothers call children who have wandered too deep into twilight. You hear it, but the sound no longer tugs. It simply informs the dark that passage continues, with or without your luggage. Pole stirs, resettles, mutters a single syllable, half sigh, half amen, then subsides into the shared cradle of sand and starlight. You follow, descending layer by layer, skin, muscle, the gentle drum of pulse slowing from march to lullaby to hush. Last thought, loose and luminous. Perhaps stories never end, they only exhale, trading lungs with listeners until every atom of once upon a time is breathed back into the night. You offer your own atom, green, whiskey-scented, slightly profane, and feel the sky accept. Sleep gathers the river, the cricket, the heartbeat, the feather, the word home spoken in a dead man's rasp, braids them into a single chord of quiet. You let it pull you under, not drowning but returning, the way rain returns to sea, the way syllables return to silence, the way every history eventually agrees to dream of its listeners. Somewhere in that returning, the stars lean closer, polite audience waiting for the final line. You give it to them, soundless, effortless, already forgetting the shape of your own mouth. Thank you. Each breath is slower. The night leans closer, folding you into its velvet hush. The river's heartbeat blends with yours. Even the crickets lower their violins. You are safe. Nothing left to do tonight but drift. Imagine the candlelight fading behind Tennessee hills, smoke curling like a lullaby above the Hermitage roof. The parrot has tucked his head beneath one green wing, dreams tasting of sugar cubes and thunder. Andrew Jackson sleeps beneath split poplar and soft earth, arguments quiet at last. Let the feather settle where it fell, green against cedar, color holding its breath. Let the mussel shell rest in your palm, cool and iridescent as moonlit water. Nothing is required of you now, no petitions, no duels, no last word corrections. Picture the stars arranging themselves into a loose quilt overhead. Each stitch is a syllable you don't need to finish. Breathe in, lilac, camp smoke, distant rain. Breathe out, ledger ink, gunpowder, funeral roses. Every exhale leaves history lighter. Every inhale draws peace closer. Feel the river carry away syllables. Hellfire, democracy, home, until they dissolve into gentle hush. Your heartbeat slows to match the oar resting current. Somewhere downstream, tomorrow is already folding itself into calm water, but it will wait. There is nothing to fear. The house is quiet, the bird is sleeping, the grave is tidy. Even the clocks have agreed to pause. Let your thoughts loosen like boat knots, drifting a little farther, a little softer, until they become the sky's own breathing. Candlelight fades, rivers flow under moonlight, stars gather overhead. You are held by darkness that remembers every story yet keeps them gently. Sleep now. Dream of green feathers and sugar cubes, of cracked poplars healing around lightning like old scars learning to sing. The end. Sweet dreams.